I'm going to talk to you about driving change, and I think you've understood from the first talk that it's a challenge to drive change. And so also I want to sort of highlight the mechanisms and things we've put in place to support any change. So I joined Queen Mary in 2020 in the pandemic, and I had a remit from Stephanie Marshall to support educators to deliver the 2030 strategy. And I've just put, hopefully in the chat, the 2030, the link to our 2030 strategy. And yes, so I'd like to share with you sort of the 5 years experience, or I'll show you how we did that, sort of started that change and things like that, and the experiences of that. So that's the talk there. And first of all, I'd like to, as my colleagues have said, we're in a large institution with a very, very long history. It was actually, for instance, it was the first university to admit women to study and things like that. So it's very, very long history there. And you can see our buildings. But with that becomes a long legacy of a way of working. And there people hold on to ways of working. And I think the research and the investigations that Emily and Steph have been showing is that change is difficult. People like and feel reassured and comfortable, and that's our challenge. So these are our, buildings here. That's our Queen's building. This is a beautiful octagon. That was the original library of the university. But this is a view out towards the city in London. So we're looking out towards what's driving change as well. All that, those new buildings, those new skills, those new jobs. So why are we driving change? We have a lot of new regulations in the UK, and they're much more specific and they're much more challenging, and they're very threshold. If we don't meet those regulations, we have to meet those regulations. So, and some of them are the surveys that Emily and Steph shared. And so we're monitored, we're regulated, and that's a challenge. We also have the social economic pressures that are happening. The whole sector is under pressure, and it's the universities under pressure and the students are under pressure. So our students are commuter students, a lot of them, and from a very deprived area in London. So yes, we have those challenges. We've got diverse student cohorts with diverse needs. We're also under pressure to increase student numbers, because obviously higher numbers brings higher tuition fees in. And then, as we've been discussing already, another driver is a shift of emphasis to employability, and employability meaning we've got to meet the skills gaps. So a shift in the philosophy, the fundamental philosophy of what higher education is for, and it's very much now focused on skills. And then we have, as we've been talking about, the AI skills. So these are all very strong drivers for needing to change. However, the need to change in educational practice is hampered across the university. And Emily and Steph, I think Emily pointed out that we've got 20 schools across, 20 schools and institutes, and we've got pockets of excellence across this large institution, but we need consistency. So we need a shared understanding of the need for change. So people pick up different messages when you've got a very spread out over campuses, spread out over disciplines, and the conversations in those different buildings, in those different locations. We need to have a shared understanding of the need, a shared understanding of what agency have they to implement change. And as you can see from the PG Cap and saying to people, well, you can bring in choice, you can bring in, what agency do they have to do that? And then another very interesting aspect, and I think, Jarrett, you were picking up on that, is about the scholarship, about the understanding of evidencing your practice. And what was really interesting to me over the last 5 years is realizing the variation of understanding of scholarly practice is really different across the piece, and people understanding different things about it. And we had inconsistency of practice, and we had inconsistency of educational change. So that was our challenge, is, you know, it's very spread out and it's very different understandings. So we needed a good solution here. And we needed a solution that had something in it for the people involved. So actually what we need to do is create alignment between the strategy and the institutional frameworks that are available. And also career pathways. We needed to have really strong career pathways so that people could understand that if they engage on this, they go on a journey and they can develop their career, and they can go up roles, you know, become readers, become professors, become directors of education, heads of school. And we needed to take people on this pathway, and that they had the agency to do that change. And so we also brought in co-creation as a way, a mechanism for change. And one of the, over on the right-hand side here, the our academics career framework, I've done a lot of work over that on the last few years of defining scholarship and really pulling that in, so people, as they grow up the, you know, journey up the levels of their profession, what their scholarship and practice would mean for them. And then also we've introduced leadership courses, and here's a photograph from our leadership courses. And I'll talk a bit more about those in a moment. But actually the solution was really getting that across university understanding of where we're heading and where we're going, and bringing people together. And I think the previous talk stressed that. So we brought in the leadership element, and we had to bring in the leadership on scholarship, you know, shared understanding and getting people to drive scholarship, evidence-informed practice. And we wanted to utilize co-creation as well. And we had to address that key skills, this whole shift towards employability being absolutely crucial, and for the student themselves, but also for our the UK economy, and really helping universities be more useful as a contributor to the national economy. First of all, let me share with you the leadership programs we brought in. We actually brought in very specific educational leadership programs. They were role-based education programs. So the university already had some leadership courses run by our HR department, which were very generic, and anybody who was getting to a leadership position could go on these generic courses. And that was more about developing like leadership concepts and things like that. But we thought, no, we're going to do very, very, very specific leadership, how you could be a leader as a module organizer. So we've got we have 5,000 modules. So, and we've got about 2,000 module organizers. And then we have program directors. So we've got a leadership program for each one of these levels. So we've got a leadership program for program directors. We've got about 256 program directors. And then we've got directors of education. There's one for each school, so that's about 20, and we have deputy directors as well. So, but roughly about 20 of those. And then we had the deans of education, you know, sort of executive leadership. So we launched 4 programs, and really identifying responsibility, accountability, but also balancing that with empowering an agency. So what we were finding, we had our 2030 strategy, but everybody thought, oh, well, that's for the university, you know, so the strategy is sitting there, and people weren't realizing that to make that strategy happen, to take us on that journey, they had a responsibility towards it. They had to be accountable, but it also means they were empowered and had agency. So how do we get people to engage with change? So this all focused on alignment and really talking to people, unpicking their roles, and say, you know, really having a really deep investigation. So these leadership courses are sort of span over about 6 months. And it's very, and the engagement has been really good, and it's been really nice as people feel valued by that, because this is specific to their role. So because they've got something, it's like, this is something for you. You know, it's not just a generic course you can go on. This has really been designed for you, and it gives people the chance to talk about their role, the challenges of the role, what they think their role is as a program director, and what they think their role is as director of education and things like that. And it's really been a very interesting journey, bringing in very, very specific role development. So, and it's really helped people understand that. So we're quite early on in our journey on these leadership programs, but we're really hoping that it will facilitate the change that where people feel more emboldened to undertake like the assessment practice that's been talked about and things like that, much more, and be more innovative and more. But the one thing that those programs are really giving us is a shared understanding. We're having a shared, we're having the opportunity to talk directly and translate the strategy for people, and then everybody's having that shared understanding. So it's been quite a lot of positivity in the room, a lot of conversation. And sometimes, like the first session of a leadership program, you'll get everybody starts moaning about all their stresses, but we take them on a journey, and then they get really positive once they've talked out all the issues and things like that. So it really helps give people a voice and a place to share concerns and move into that positive space. So that is a really lovely investment into people's professional development. The other thing that we've been really investing in is leadership in scholarship. And so we've created this package around scholarship. We have scholarship courses and impact, or how to evaluate impact. We've done a lot of training of our own team. We actually got impact specialists in. We have national people in the UK that are national experts on educational impact, and we got them in to make sure the whole of our team had a shared understanding, talking through the theory of change and things like that. So we've really been training our own staff up and really helping the wider university understand how to look at their own practice, and if they implement change, it's evidence-informed change. And we've created fellows. We have 20 fellows a year that can join the academy, as it's a 0.2 buyout, so 1 day a week buyout, and we will buy out their salary for 0.2 so they can concentrate on leading on scholarship. And then we've also got some funding here. So we have an annual funding that project teams we like it to be collaborative projects that they can apply to. And then we have an annual festival of education where it's a big scholarship CPD day where all they can share their outcomes. We have posters, we have a big sharing, and it's a fantastic celebration of education at Queen Mary. And actually we were recently inspected by sort of government auditors, accreditors, and they highlighted the festival as a really outstanding good practice. So it's a big CPD day for all our educators. So these are photos from last Festival of Education, and these are photos of some of our fellows who work on. Usman here works on learner engagement analytics. Louise here works on the concept of flourishing. So we have some really vibrant, interesting developments, and we really feel like now we're developing, our fellows are really leading in scholarship. So we're really driving that concept for our educators to make a difference and stand out. The other aspect I want to delve a bit deeper into is to talk to you about utilising co-creation as a driver for change. And I think Emily and Steph's slide, where they're showing all the different people, they had careers, they had all the educators, students, is how we can use bringing people together in the co-creation space and really driving change through that. So quite often when you're thinking about change management, You can have a lot of theory around change management and things like that, but actually how to make it happen, how to turn it from a theory or something. And I think co-creation is an actual mechanism. You can start making that change happen by bringing people together and them, contributing to that. So really see co-creation as a way to implement change and to get everybody on board with that. But obviously, you've got to create those shared understandings, and you've got to create that knowledge base as well of where we're going. So co-creation at Queen Mary is central to our strategy. So this is part of the strategy here. So we will deliver outstanding, inclusive, world-class education, co-created with our diverse student body, and enhance and things like that. So that's one part. And another bit, our strategy builds on existing excellence to ensure that students are co-creators in their education. So here it's focusing on the student body being co-creators, but we can really see that it's all the different types of staff as well. It's our professional services, it's our educators, it's our managers, it's our career service, all can be part of that co-creation story. And then what is co-creation? And it's really previously, obviously, we've had student reps and things like that, but it kind of moves on between, from student engagement partnership. It's actually to be a meaningful sort of collaboration, a meaningful constructive, you construct things together. So you're creating together. So it's just constructing. So I think the university already had the concept as partnership with students, through the student rep system, but this is sort of a step beyond there, where all the staff and different staff come together with students and actually create whether it's curriculum design, whether it's some VR things, or all the different things it can be, improving assessment practice and things like that. So we have a lot of, and Beauville at all here. So Catherine Beauville has really led on co-creation in the UK, and so always could look at some of her work on co-creation. But we've really been embedding it. And what co-creation does is lead us from that leadership space where you've actually, I told you we're training up the leaders, but now we've got to distribute that down. So we've got to share that. So with some sharing of power. And I'd like to share a story about myself here, that a lot of staff, when you first hear that you're going to share power, is a bit unnerving. And at a previous institution, we brought in co-creation, and I myself was struggling with that because I was a program leader and we brought in student program leaders. And I'm thinking, well, look, I've got 35 years of experience of leading this and teaching this. How can somebody just come in with no experience and be a leader, a program leader? And actually going on that journey and sharing that power, it absolutely changed my whole perception of my program. It changed the way I was thinking, and I was absolutely blown away with just the huge amount of experiences, as we say here, diverse. I just had a wonderful experience. I really opened my mind. It really gave me a different way of looking at things. I really discovered student stories and student backgrounds that if I hadn't engaged in that co-creation process, which I was a bit hesitant in the beginning, and so I'm a real advocate for this now, is about allowing that power sharing space. And it is a bit unnerving because you are accountable for how that program runs. You're accountable for it. So it's a bit unnerving opening and allowing about other voices in. But people bring different things. You bring your expertise in your discipline and your subject and all the expertise, and they bring their experience and their experience of life and their different contexts they come through. And it really is such a powerful thing to really shift how. So actions can be tailored between what students' expectations and staff expectations. And as we're saying here, it's an intersection of those two spheres. And you're more aware of your identity, you're more aware of your own expertise, you're more aware of your accountability of what you're bringing to the table. And it's interesting working to actually think, what do I bring to the table and what do others bring to the table there while we're working? So, and then the responsibilities become more shared and it's a common endeavor. But it's a tough journey to make when you've really studied for many, many years and you've worked for many, many years and you feel like you've earned your power or earned your responsibility. So it's hard to, and like I still hear academics cry about that across the university. So it is a thing. So what we have done, so we've built these tools, so you can access these on our website. They're public access. So we've built up a whole why co-create, examples of sort of activities, tools for developing and promoting things. So we've built a whole sort of structure around that. And we even have like surgeries where staff can drop in and work and, you know, so there's a massive support system we've built up there. And one of the lovely things I think we've done, Emily was talking about how her team is the education recognition team, and we recognise staff for the, you know, they can get this fellowship. There's associate fellowship, senior fellowship, and principal fellowship. You can go through those layers. But we brought in a student recognition award. So it's called the SEED Award, and it's student enhanced engagement. So students that engage with co-creation, they're rewarded as well and recognized for that. So we wanted co-creation to be a reward mechanism, and this is a contribution that students have to make. It's at least 10 hours, and they develop, obviously when they get the award, they're developing skills through co-creation. It helps them stand out to potential employers. And in the UK, we have something called the HERE transcript, which is a higher education achievement record, which stands alongside their degree program. So it's a transcript of all the sort of employability, the skills development they've done alongside their degree. And this co-creation features on that as well. So we created this whole recognition something, and I think a driver of change, a driver of engaging with change, is to recognize contributions. So, and these are some of our, we do have, this is us awarding the SEED Award to students on our transnational programs. So we have a few thousand students, I think it's about, I can't remember now, I think it's about 5,000 students out in China, and this is us awarding some of the co-creation to the Chinese students. So myself and our colleague Anna Cabral here has done a lot of work in building up all of this. Like this, she's been the main driver behind all of this here. So you can see it's valued so much, and it's this fantastic ceremony they were holding in Beijing. So it's really it increases the value of the work we're doing. And then finally, sorry, rather a big jump, but this is onto the other concept that we were, you know, Eric, you were talking about is we have to embed key skills. We have to make sure our students are aware of employability. Our student, you know, it is a huge pressure for everybody, and we have the challenge of AI. So at Queen Mary, we're creating a Centre for Excellence in AI. We're going to launch it officially in the second week of December. And our aim of this Centre for AI is to ensure that our graduates stand out as having key skills. So when they go for job interviews or something, that we've trained all our graduates so they know they have the responsibility, they have the ethical understanding of what AI can do. We also need to train our educators as well. So it's not, you know, we obviously have some people that teach AI and we have some staff that are very, very highly skilled in artificial intelligence, but we've got a broad range of educators. So this unit will be staff training, student training, and we, you know, and it's part of our building our reputation in educational excellence. Sorry, got a hand up.
Janet,
Yes, yes.
is there a buy-in from your educators for AI?
Oh, I think
What's
someone's
the
the
yeah, what's
balance, the
yeah.
balance. I think I've just saw somebody's survey result, and I think there's 43% don't like it at all. So I think there's the balance is, um, there is sort of 60-40, I think.
Okay.
There's yeah, so
Because
there
you're
is
gonna
that. Yeah,
because you're going to start in December, right? So I wonder
yeah.
how do you, where's the balance?
Yeah, yeah. So there has been some survey work, and yes, that's going to be a challenge of
Mhm.
that. But yeah. So I'm just trying to, yeah. It's Zhuzhou who's done that survey work. So we've already started training educators. We've trained one of our colleagues. It's an academic colleague, has trained about 600 people across the university. So we're building that, but there is the challenge of people not liking it, and there's the challenge of sustainability in AI. And that came out the other week, that a lot of people are really worried about engaging with the AI because of the sustainability and the amount of power and things that so there is a lot of challenge around that, but it's kind of our feeling that it's not going away, and it has to be addressed whether we're happy or not. We still have to think about it, discuss it. So I think there will be a lot of ethical discussions around it, but we're creating that centre so we can, as a space, to have that discussion. Yeah, thank you. So so the students have that discussion, the staff have that, and also the understanding of that. And as Emily said earlier, we have these set of graduate attributes, and I must name check Steph Fuller here. You've done lots of, Steph has really worked hard over the last 3 to 4 years pulling our graduate attributes together. I just want to, what you'll see here are our values are inclusive, proud, ambitious, collegial, and ethical. And then we map our attributes so they're sort of mapped here, that the attributes that we hope that students will develop during their degree program are mapped to the different uh, values. And it was quite interesting because few of our students were worried about feeling proud, and actually translating it into attributes really helps people engage with the values. And here we've just over the summer brought in, actually spelt out about AI, and there be AI and digitally literate, but it's really, and we mean that they'll understand the ethical aspects of that as well. So these are our attributes, and it's through this conversations with the embedding these attributes into a degree program that we're able to embed the skills. So at the beginning I was saying that we're bringing frameworks, and this graduate attribute framework as part of the employability framework really helps the conversations, really helps the embedding, and really, if you've got the right frameworks, you can embed change. We've also got community of practice, and that's been quite spontaneous, set up by very interested partners, and where they share any projects they're doing. It's sort of crowdsourcing of things, and it really increases the knowledge base. And so what we're doing by making this centre, and we'll have academic heads of centre, we're going to pull all the AI work that's going on across the university together under this umbrella, but also have the space to have those discussions. So summary of the experience, I definitely feel that we're developing the shared understanding, and educators are starting to engage readily with key initiatives. I've noticed a shift when we first, 4 or 5 years ago, when we went, people were a bit like looking at us very skeptically when we were doing presentations. And just yesterday I was in the room with the directors of education, and they were all just talking about employability and just being, so I really think we've shifted our educators into a space of a really strong engagement. So I've learned myself that absolute patience is needed. Takes, and I think in education, about 3 years to get a scheme to work properly. And obviously we're quite under pressure from senior managers to make it work instantly. But if there's any message I can say, that patience, it will happen. And we're 5 years in and we're now reaping the rewards. We are being shortlisted for international recognition awards and things like that. We're starting to feel a change in people being positive and engaged. Educators are starting to value that their professional development is for them. So we're really starting to see that, but it's not an easy journey and you do take a lot of flack on the way. But it's really interesting pulling these concepts together to support change. And I think so. I think understanding that leadership is a fundamental part of this, and actually identifying that leadership is key, and the agency of leadership for your role that you're in is key, and then this understanding scholarship and understanding how we do educational change, how we evaluate our change, and how we use the evidence that's in the literature, but also evaluate what we're doing. And that recognition and awards are they're just amazing for driving change. If we recognize when people are doing new things and we support them going for awards, we give them recognition. So strategy can drive change, but the whole thing needs scaffolding so that staff can engage. We can't just have a strategy, because in the beginning we had this strategy and we thought, why is nobody engaging with it? You know, it was really, there was a disconnect between the strategy and what people were doing. And they just literally thought it was something the university was doing, but they didn't see themselves as the university. So there was a disconnect, but we've really worked on that and scaffolded that strategy so that people can understand it, they're part of it and they're part of the delivery of that. So thank you very much. I'll stop sharing there and I'll just try and I saw there's quite a few things on the chat, but I can't see the chat for a moment. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Janet, this is really fascinating, the concept of change. If you could please comment a little bit about I think this is an ongoing discussion on our campuses. You know, how do you make the assessment of student skill and competency meaningful to professors who feel that they are not necessarily teaching for workplace, right? I mean, we have those history of philosophers, no, we don't do this. This is for, computer programmers, perhaps, or there is, nursing program. That's where they are focusing skills, us. It's kind of like, what type of comments or considering the community of practice experience that you mentioned, where are your discussions heading?
Yeah, I totally recognize those comments, yes, from different disciplines of see skills in different ways. But I would say that having those graduate attributes and having the parts of that and having discussions around those attributes really helps people to think about that. And what, Steph, I didn't know if you want to come in here about surfacing. A lot of the conversation is about you're already doing a lot of these skills, like if someone's giving a presentation or if somebody's doing a debate, they are developing communication skills. So Steph's had more, if you want to come in about surfacing those skills, Steph.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a big part of the work around graduate attributes has been, saying, look, this is not necessarily something new we're asking you to add in. It's already there. It's part of your discipline. And what has also been really useful, I think, we worked really closely with students in identifying what the university's set of graduate attributes should be. So it was a kind of co-creation project. And then that's really powerful going out to academic staff because it's something that's coming from students, and it's what students are saying, well, actually, this is what I'm here at university for. For me, this is the purpose of higher education. So I think that's really important to sort of represent that student view to our academic colleagues.
You know, absolutely. I think that's really what's missing from our discussions here in the United States. Again, obviously, this is a huge generalization. I can't speak for every single institution that's out there, but the student engagement, or not even engagement, but their awareness of the fact that they are studying. That's why they are coming to school, to learn things, not just receive a grade. You know, that's just like, you know, seems like those are two conflicting universes that we kind of like, you know, well, that's just the way it is, kind of a thing. And accountability measures are focused on, you know, attendance, persistence, diploma attainment. What students learn in the process seems to be like, yeah, good question. You know, that nobody seems to have any good answers for. So I do have one question. Someone raised their hand here. I think one of the speakers. Please. Oh yeah, there she is. Okay, okay, go ahead.
Hi. I actually put it in the chat also. To co-create, co means do it together. You need trust. To create anything, you need to be together, but to co-create, you need trust.
Yes.
I have many thoughts in my mind, many questions about the trust piece, but maybe I'll let you address that first, and then I can ask more questions on that.
Yeah, I think that was maybe my problem when I first started with co-creation. Did I trust that that person could contribute well enough? You know, so it took, I think trust develops during the process. If you have a, well, you know, we've built all those resources and things like that, and through the process of engagement, the trust builds. I think, and it's having trust in the process and then trust in the person. So if you've got a well-structured, supported co-creation offer, and that's what we've really developed, I think, then you've got a process. People go, oh, hang on here, there's a lot of support here. There's a process, and there's guidance, and it's all that thing, so they can trust the process, because we're presenting to them as tried and trusted, with case studies, with examples, and then they can start to trust the students and other staff. So, and I do think by really, through reward and recognition, and through good frameworks, good reward and recognition, and those communities of practice, you start to build that trust. So trust is not a given. You have to work at it, and you have to put the pieces in place to make that trust build. But absolutely, and once you get there, it's such a great reward, but it's not, no, just like that. You do have to work at it. And I think we've been putting structures in place, and we're putting more in place. We're just talking about bringing in mentors to support that process as well, and things like that. So so we're constantly evolving that support around co-creation. Yeah.
So I'm glad you said once you got it going, but was there a certain critical number? So what I mean is, did you start with 2, 4, 20 that you really worked on, and then it builds to 200 and 2,000 and 2 million, right?
Yeah, that's a very nice point, actually. So how it all started at Queen Mary is Louise Uni's work on flourishing in the medical school, and she had 5 students that she worked very closely with. And she came to me when I first started and said, Jen, I've got these students and I'd really like to recognize them in a way, because they've helped me so much. And I thought, yeah, I like this idea. I like this. And we started the conversation. So we did start with a very small group of students who helped us design the award, design the and it's just blossomed from there. It's just, so we did start small, and we just grown and grown it. And then the concept has been part of this whole, how do we get people to do scholarship, and we have things like student internships around scholarship, so that we actually fund some interns to do some scholarship work. So it has all built up from there. So it wasn't instantaneously we had a large co-creation effort. It has grown from, I suppose, and that's why we use the word seed as the award, because it has been a sort of whole growth from that. But what might be quite nice is, yeah, so Emily's posted the flourishing thing. It's been a lot around And that concept of flourishing has been really helpful to grow things.
Thank you. And I think Steve is next. I know that Steve Ehrman, please.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Steve.
I've really enjoyed all of these talks. They're just, I've learned a lot, and it's been very reassuring that beneath all the differences in nomenclature and surface constructs, the issues are pretty much the same. So I was really interested, Janet, right toward the end of your talk, when you talked about, okay, you can have a strategy, but if people don't see their place in it, then nothing works.
Yeah.
So we had to build scaffolding. I'd like you to talk in more detail about what some of that scaffolding was and how you made it work.
Yeah, it's a very interesting journey, because I remember it was really, this is very embarrassing, but after about a year of being at Queen Mary, and I came in and the strategy had been created, and I thought that people were all on board with the strategy. So we built up the team to deliver, to help deliver the strategy. And after about a year, and I suddenly clicked that the staff didn't see that they were doing the strategy. They were just doing their discipline work, and they're just going, oh yeah, somebody taught us. So it was from that the scaffolding really was building up the concept of leadership. We realized that we needed distributed leadership. So that scaffolding, those 4 leadership programs were part of the scaffolding. So that was one element, so getting in a team. So we had to go out, recruit, we had to bid for money, recruit the team, and create 4 programs so people could see a journey. And in those conversations, in those leadership programs, was a way to connect people to the strategy. There's so many components of the scaffolding. Another element of it is the whole academy. We spent a lot of time making sure every single thing we did is aligned to strategy. So we have been through our narrative as an academy several times and said, like, let's get this aligned with strategy. How does the PG cap fit into the strategy? How does everything we offer align to the strategy? So whenever we go out, we talk strategy and bring people in, and we have the leadership, and the scaffolding is all the things I've been talking about. It is the co-creation resources, that's scaffolding. It's leadership development courses, that's scaffolding. Having a PG cap that helps it, that's scaffolding. So you're really making sure that the strategy is talked about in the actual qualification, whereas before it might have been focused on pedagogy, just straightforward pedagogy. We now bring the strategy in to the actual delivery, and so its strategy is through everything we talk about, and every course we offer and everything we do, we refer to the strategy and how. And so I don't know if Emily or Steph, you can think of other elements of the scaffolding.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking about the way, because I joined Queen Mary Academy 2 years ago, and from different institution before, and I found exactly a very different way of working, particularly around strategy. So when I go into conversations with staff, and it can be a whole range of discussions. I pull quite a lot on the strategy. We also have a framing of education approach that I put it in the chat in a minute that Stephanie alluded to. So it also helps frame the pedagogic choices that people will make. So they have a range of possible approaches. I would say, well, yeah, but look, within Queen Mary, this is how we're doing things. So yeah, I don't know if it adds a little bit, or it completes what you're saying, totally confirming that, if you're on the ground working with staff, on the nitty-gritty of their teaching, we bring in the strategy there as well.
And also our fund, we've got our innovation funding. Now, when they apply for that, they have to say, how does it deliver the strategy. So they want some funding to deliver a scholarship project, and they have to say it will, you know, so everything we're offering to staff, they have to think, oh, well, if I do this haptics in dentistry, you know, so they're doing immersive learning in dentistry, they say this delivers a strategy because innovation and new technology is listed in the strategy, and I can, you know, so we're constantly connecting them to the strategy. So in the support that we offer, so all our, you know, the support that and like the festival will always talk about the strategy when we launch the festival and things like that. So it's making those connections very clear and very visible to everybody all the time. So it's a lot of scaffolding. So it's complicated, but it's literally everything sort of connects together. So I suppose it's a bit like the diagram I had was of a scaffold. Everything's connected. So we always connect. Does that help? Hopefully it's helped. Has that answered your question? Or
It went a long way to doing it. I'm getting the sense that it takes a lot of work,
yes.
not just by your team, but by the person who's co-creating an idea of what my part in this is. And I'm completely interested in this because I'm working on something similar here, and in designing workshops from scratch and resources, it's sort of, well, you could go from here's a handout with one paragraph on it. You know, from here you should be able to see versus, well, we'll need to work, whatever your role is, we'll need, you know, three-hour workshops and some work in between. I realize it's a terrible question to ask because it's so abstract, but I'm just trying to get an idea of the scope somehow.
I think one thing you pointed out there, it takes time. So we have to get people have to come on these leadership programs. That takes time. They have to give up quite a bit of their time to do it. And so we have to get buy-in. So they can't just sign up for the leadership, but they have to be nominated by the head of school because we want them to have the time to do it. And if they just sign themselves up, they're going to be really trying to fit it in with their day job. So we need the managers to support them coming. So it takes time from the individual educator to come on the courses and follow through. But it also, as a team, we've had lots of away days to think ourselves about how what we do aligns to it and things like that. So we've taken the time ourselves to develop ourselves and understand the strategy, and then also educators have to invest time as well. So yeah, it does take explicit concentrated effort, you know, really we're going to do this. So we just suddenly clicked, I think about a year into it, I thought, no, this is a bigger challenge than we thought. And yeah, so you can't just state the strategy. They look very nice strategies, don't they? They read very nice, but yeah, it takes a lot of translation. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the last question, well, I don't know if it's the last question, but one thing that again emerges in those dialogues is the student role. I know Khurshid has a question about faculty compensation and so forth. I guess that's you know the structure of it, how you figure this out, you know, according to your institutional guidelines. The question that I would have is about the student engagement, right? At what point do you inform students that these discussions are taking place, if at all? I mean, is this something that's only faculty driven and it's just kind of like stuff because we know what's good for you? Or do you have an outlet? Do you have a voice, a space where students' voices are recognized?
Yeah, well, what's really nice, I should have put a picture of that actually. We have a stall at the open days. So open days when students are coming to look if they want to come to Queen Mary, we explain that they can do this engagement work. We do lots of engagement through student reps so that the course reps know about it. We're very strongly linked to our student union. the representatives. So there's quite a few different ways into the sort of student space to help them explain. Emily, I don't know, or Steph, I don't know if you think of more, but I'm thinking the reps and the union and the way, you know.
Yeah, I think the student, I mean, from my point of view, around assessment, for example, the student union have been really strong collaborators. So they sit, for example, they sit on our committees and on our boards, they advise. So last year we developed some principles of assessment design. There were, you know, at the table where students who had exactly the same power as us, you know, same voice, you know, and I think there was and in fact were really important, and they did research, research among students to find out how they were, you know, what the views were, and the reports that came out of them were really of such use and such high quality. It was really really impressive. So just a few examples, if you like, of how students are on board with this work. Yeah.
So this is all good, and again, we cannot you know, forget the part where, you know, look at the learning experience that students go through as a result, right? This is the kind of like, you know, we all of a sudden find ourselves as the role models for you know, how to run an organization, how to make it effective, how to, and I think you underscored it more than once, you know, the importance of teamwork and building the community.
Yeah.
You know? So this is all those you know, humane aspects, I suppose, of our interactions. So that's fantastic. Great. Well, anybody else? I think we are great. It's, oh gosh, yes, it's we are almost I'm sure it's getting late in the UK, right?
Yeah, it's quite dark. It's quite dark outside.
So hey, what can I say? We are just so very grateful. Oh, let me see here. Khurshid, would you like to elaborate on your question about the funding? If you could just succinctly state your case here.
Sure. So I don't know how it is in the UK, so this might not be relevant to the UK, but we are guided by contracts at many of our institutions here, faculty contracts, staff contracts, etc., etc. And any additional time needs to be compensated in certain ways, which is guided by the contracts. So I was just curious if there was any such compensation, stipend, anything like that on all ends, because it seems like there are many parties involved in this. And again, if it's not relevant to the UK, I completely understand. I'm just thinking of it from our environment here. Thank you.
It's very relevant. So yeah, there's workload allocation models across they do vary in the different schools. So on the teaching and scholarship contracts, some people get 10% of the time to do scholarship, some get 20%. So those are varying depending on the different discipline areas, how much time they get to do scholarship. So the other aspect, if they want to come on one of our courses, they have to negotiate that time from the workload allocation. They have to negotiate that. And the other aspect is for the fellows, we do buy out 0.2 of their time. So we transfer money into the school. So we do for 20 staff a year, we transfer money in. So it is a big part of the conversation about how you do that. So it's a lot of conversations around workload allocation and buyout of time and things. So there is a pressure that scholarship and development and change work has to happen in a small percentage of the time, actually. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's yeah, that also sort of incentivizes things, also ensures the trust of at least the financial distribution will be fair, and so on and so forth. So that somebody's not putting in 30% of time and getting 0.2% of compensation or whatever it is. So thank you for addressing that. I didn't know if that was relevant in your context.
Yeah, it's very relevant. Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. I think in many other systems, money does talk, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much for that question. Well, again, I know it's getting late, so thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Was just absolutely fantastic. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to publish all the recording on our YouTube channel, and then there's the podcast that we are working on as well. The PowerPoint presentations, right? They are available for the public, right? We can send them out to others. Again, that's a most frequently asked question as well. A lot of people are demanding those materials, so I'm very happy to forward them. If you don't get them in timely fashion, please don't hesitate to let me know. Send me an email. We'll take it from there. Well, thank you very much, Queen Mary team. Very kind of you to share your expertise. Very, very, very insightful. We are happy that you found time to talk to us today.
Thank you very much. We enjoyed it, and thank you for inviting us. It was very nice.
Thank you. It's a really great conversation and questions, and it's been really, really lovely to share practice from so far away from each other, and yet because I just marvel at this. I mean, I'm still at that level of just really marveling that we're having this conversation. Yeah.
Yep.